and the main focus for the Central Bank in 2013, and indeed still today, obviously, is restoring financial stability and supporting the domestic economic recovery. Nature and scale of this challenge, this task remains challenging, and it still requires resolute action from various participants, but significant progress has been achieved on a number of fronts. The recovery of the Irish economy is continuing. Strong, broadly based employment growth has been supported by positive developments around investment, external demand and retail spending. Another positive development has been the improving external conditions that are projected to further support stronger export growth in the coming year. This improving economic environment provides an encouraging backdrop to the bank's key priorities, which include the ongoing repair of the banking system and the delivery of sustainable solutions for distressed borrowers. Much was achieved on these and other fronts during the course of 2013. We satisfied the many requirements of the EU-IMF programme, thereby helping to ensure the creation of more favourable market conditions for Ireland, allowing for the successful exit from the programme. And we had the liquidation of IBRC with the associated exchange of non-transferable promissory note collateral for marketable long-term government bonds. On-target progress in the development of sustainable solutions for both household and small business borrowers under stress, and very significant legislative progress on a range of financial services issues, that's European financial services issues in particular, during Ireland's presidency of the EU. Now, however, it's evident that challenges remain. Debt levels, both public and private, remain elevated and will continue to pose a significant test for all policymakers. Balance sheet repair and consolidation continues to be an essential ingredient in ensuring the durability of the economic recovery. At the macro level, the need for the public finances to remain on course for the announced path of fiscal consolidation is intensified by the programme exit. There's no room for any doubt on this score to arise, and financial markets are right to assume that a disciplined fiscal approach will be maintained. It would be folly to allow any other supposition to gain credence. As you know, the Central Bank operates to a publicly stated strategy. There are 8 goals. Central Bank staff continued in the course of 2013 to apply diligent attention on a daily basis and on many other fronts to the twin elements of the bank's mission of safeguarding stability and protecting consumers. The variety and complexity of the tasks undertaken is set out in the annual report, which is arranged along the lines of the strategy. On financial matters, as has been the case in the previous 4 years of the crisis, careful financial management as well as favourable side effects of the crisis have combined to result in a large financial profit for the bank, the bulk of which accrues to the Exchequer. This year the bank's profit amounted to 1.5 billion. It's the largest ever. After retained earnings, surplus income of 1.2 billion will be paid over to the Exchequer. And I should also draw your attention to another report we published today. It's the annual performance statement for financial regulation, and that's available along with all our reports on our website. Well, that's the prepared speech. I know that you'll probably have a number of questions about the court case as well, but I haven't prepared any remarks on that. But open to questions now.
Maybe if we start on the court case, can we get your reaction maybe, and Sir Rue's reaction to the comments of the judge yesterday, please?
Yeah, well, I think nothing that we would want to disagree with in what the judge has said. This is obviously a sorry story. What I would say is that the deficiencies that were mentioned by the judge in the court case very much resonate with what we have already laid out, and indeed was in my report of, it's nearly 4 years ago now, May 2010, when I was asked by the government of the time to report on the regulatory structure in the run-up to the crisis. And I think a lot of what I said there on the much broader front of the banking failures and the regulatory problems that were associated with that are echoed in the specific comments that the judge has made. So this is something that is behind us, but of course the financial crisis is not behind us, as had a long period of consequence. That's what we're dealing with today. But the regulatory actions that happened in the past, I think, are something that we couldn't expect to see today. In fact, I'm sure that we would not see such regulatory behaviour today.
And Mr. Roux, as a regulator, what did you make of those comments?
Well, it applies to a regulator of the past, really. I think there's been sweeping changes introduced since the governor and then Matthew Elderfield came. So I think really it's a historical comment of what happened in 2008, but I don't think it reflects in any sense what's going on in the CBI today.
Governor, do you think a full banking inquiry now needs to be set up as quickly as possible, and that as part of that it shouldn't just be the banks themselves, but the actions of the central bank and the financial regulator at the time should be a very central part of that?
Well, I'm sure that the public inquiry will go ahead, and my reaction to that is I think it is a good idea, and I think it's a necessary part of the process of. I think as often been said, there's a great deal of anger and in some respects suspicion in public mind about aspects of the banking crisis. I think we actually know, and when I say we, I don't mean just we in the regulatory system, but through public information, know almost all that there is to know about the banking crisis. But nevertheless, I think having a public and open set of hearings will go a long way towards restoring additional confidence in the regulatory system and in public affairs in Ireland generally. So I do think it's an important process, even if we learn nothing from it.
Governor, has any current or past member of staff of the financial regulator been disciplined in relation to behaviour? And separately, and again, and in the light of Judge Nolan's comment, you're a very profitable organisation. Have you assessed the risk and vulnerability of the organisation to litigation now, civil litigation?
What I'd say about the first question is that our human resources policy is entirely focused on the effective and efficient delivery of our mandate. We have had a lot of new hires, we have had many departures from the organisation, and we have had many reassignments within the organisation. And that is all in the interest of efficient and effective delivery of our mandate.
Has anyone been disciplined?
That's a very specific question, which I'm not sure that's a well-posed question. Because I'm not really dodging it, because I'm not sure that I want to be drawn into our wider human resources issues. It's a big organisation. There are a lot of people involved. And if any of my colleagues want to add to that, but it's now we're always aware of legal challenges. There are court cases involving the central bank at the moment. So yeah, are we aware of these things? We're aware of these things.
Do you think that the judge's comments yesterday about the role that the regulator played makes the central bank particularly vulnerable?
No.
On the same, be it a bank inquiry or within institutions, are you in favour of clawback of pensions of bankers? Are you in favour of clawback of pensions of officials who were involved in one of the most extraordinary banking booms and busts the world's seen?
Well, we work here as a public institution within a framework of law and contract. And whatever results people might want to see, we have to and will continue to abide with law and contract. And so that's all I'll say about that.
Would you call on the former head of financial regulation to give back part of his severance that he received at the time?
It's not for me to get into particular individuals or issues of that type.
Do you think it would
I have a job to do.
Do you think, given the criticism yesterday. Do you think that the severance package,
I'm not going to be drawn on such a question yet.
Governor, could I ask you about Conor Horan? Could you just clarify, is he currently on secondment?
Okay, so as I say, I don't want to talk about individuals, but as a matter of factual clarification or information, yes, he is on secondment. He is working with the European Banking Authority.
And when is he due back?
At the end of this year is the current arrangement is the end of December. Yeah,
And what role will he come back to?
I haven't any comment on that.
Sorry, I do apologize. Just returning to the scope of a banking inquiry.
Mm.
You obviously interested to rebuild confidence, as you
Yeah.
were saying. So how wide should it be, and how specific should it be? Should it be obviously the chief executives who were involved in institutions and who were involved in reckless lending? What would assume would be called? But would credit committees? I mean, how credit committees be called? Members of credit committees, given the failure of the huge failure of the banks here to check the credible lending. I mean, how wide should it go to rebuild confidence and to get at the truth?
Now, of course, it depends on how long you want the inquiry to go on for, if that could be one objective. Deciding exactly the scope of the inquiry is something I know that various people not in this organisation are considering it, and there are various ways of approaching it. My own preference would be for a broad scope of the topics, the dates. I don't see why it should be narrowed to a very particular episode or period of time. Indeed, my own report went from the foundation of the financial regulator in 2003 right up to the banking guarantee. And I wouldn't have any problem with an inquiry that continued on beyond the banking guarantee and into bailout and stuff like that. But the considerations here there are practical and tactical considerations to have an effective inquiry that actually lands is a good way of communicating and engaging people. If it's just going on for months and months into minutiae that are of no interest to anybody, then it would have failed.
You don't mind a question that's not mine, but just on stress tests.
Yeah.
You said before you were confident Irish banks wouldn't need any more capital.
No, I didn't say before that I was confident in that. What I said was, and RT will have the clip. I said, I don't expect the banks to need capital with that tone of voice. And then somebody said, didn't expect the banks to need capital. And I didn't ever say confident, right? That doesn't mean that I'm not revising anything. So that's just a preamble. What's your question?
This is just after the parameters.
Yeah, am I still equally confident?
How do you feel?
Yeah.
And then
Okay.
the second question, inflation figures this morning were a little bit up to 0.7% Eurozone rather than 0.5 in March. I'm sure you won't
Yeah.
comment, but just
Okay. So on the stress tests, and maybe Cyril may want to add something on it. A lot of work has gone into designing these stress tests at European level, and basically a base scenario for what likely to happen in the economy was prepared by the European Commission staff. So that's an important element of it. You might say, is that too optimistic, too pessimistic? But then the greater interest is in the stress, and it was a scenario. What happens if? And there's a coherent scenario, a shock that would hit all of Europe, indeed all of the world, but all of Europe. And the part we at the Central Bank of Ireland were particularly focusing on was how that shock passes through into the Irish economy, and to make sure that the stress parameters announced by the EBA yesterday, that they reflected a reasonable interpretation of how such a shock would transmit itself to the Irish economy. And so we worked very closely, our economists worked very closely with the European Systemic Risk Board staff and ECB staff in trying to model that relationship. So broadly speaking, I'm satisfied with the way that has come out and that Ireland is reasonably represented. The impact on Ireland is reasonably represented. Now, I'm not going to guide on what the impact on the Irish banks is. And of course, I wanted to have it both ways, because previously I was saying, I don't know because the stresses haven't been decided yet, so I couldn't possibly take. Now the stresses have been decided, and you say, come on, we come back to you and ask you. But I'm not going to go there. Not only because it's quite complicated, it's true that we know more now, but I'm just not going to go there because it's not fair, not just to Irish banks, but which we all have a shareholding in, but really for the wider system, speculating in this process, what will happen to this bank, that bank, this banking system, that banking system, I think, I know is totally unhelpful. So you won't hear any forecasts from me. You'll have to wait until October. Anything to add, Cyril?
You were probably hopeful, weren't you? You were probably hopeful that obviously that the banks will pass.
If I say broadly hopeful, he'll say seemed to express a considerable confidence.
No,
I'm just not going to guide.
you're
I am not going to guide on it. I just amn't going to guide on it. Sorry.
And on any comments on the inflation?
Do you want to say anything about stress test?
No, I think you've covered it.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll come back to the inflation. Yeah.
Yeah. It will take time to go through the effect of all these parameters in the accounts and the balance sheet of the banks. That's why the results won't be announced next week, but in October, because you need that time to make the calculations.
So the inflation in Europe.
Okay. Well, thanks for letting me know, because I was prepared for this press conference. The flash estimate of European inflation, which 0.7 is it's low. ECB Governing Council has been concerned about low inflation, not only 2014, but in the forecast of 2015, 2016, still well below the target, the medium-term target, and that's why you see policy rate at 0.25%, and that's why you hear Mario Draghi talking about, maybe we could do this, maybe we could do that. So certainly this inflation figure doesn't move you in the direction of saying, oh, phew, the period of low inflation is now over. Certainly it doesn't do that.
What do you think should be done?
Yeah, I think what should be done is express my view very clearly and convincingly in the Governing Council, so the action should be taken. No, I am concerned about period of low inflation. Some people are just focusing on risk of deflation. It could be deflation, and that's not the only thing. I am concerned that low inflation over a protracted period of time is not what ECB Eurosystem was set up to do, and it's important that we use all effective tools in the most effective way to get it closer to target.
Governor, how worried is the bank about the position of Ulster Bank at the moment, and how big a problem do you think it is systemically in the banking sector, and what do you want to see happen at Ulster Bank from the Central Bank of Ireland's point?
Well, Ulster Bank is an important contributor to financial services in Ireland. It's got a big part of the market, particularly geographically a little bit more in the upper half of the island of Ireland. So I think, and we think Ulster Bank as an important contributor. Competition in banking is not very strong at present. A number of the foreign-owned banks have retreated. Not all, but a number of them have. I think it's very important to have a variety of players offering different products, different prices, different ideas, and so the presence of Ulster remains very important to us. I think when you're talking about the issues around Ulster, you're saying the issues around their parent company, Royal Bank of Scotland, and its strategy going forward. And I don't have any particular insight into that bank strategy.
Right. I mean, does the central bank want, or is it arguing in the sort of longer term for, say, a merger between Ulster and TSB?
Well,
or some combination?
I don't think the central bank is in the position of arguing for a merger. This idea has been floated around. Merging two institutions is no easy thing. When I used to study banking problems in other countries, there was a mantra to say, you certainly don't merge two weak institutions. Well, fortunately, we've been strengthening both of those institutions. Ulster Bank has had an enormous amount of capital injected by the Royal Bank of Scotland shareholder. Same with PTSB. So from a capital point of view, one wouldn't make that sort of criticism. But merging is a challenge, and if they do it, we'll certainly be interested in helping make sure that it works out. But I think that's just an idea that one reads about in the newspaper, and I don't know that that will happen. Maybe other things might happen.
So is PTSB viable alone?
Well, I often hear people say, oh, you can't have just a mortgage bank. But actually you can have just a mortgage bank. All over the world there are just mortgage banks. So PTSB has inherited a very difficult balance sheet with a lot of tracker mortgages and non-core assets. It's working through those. It's been quite effective in setting up a recovery regime. It's got quite a strong franchise. So PTSB is a significant player.
Governor, have you asked the Minister for Finance what he means when he talks about setting up a third banking force, and how how that might come about, what shape it might take?
Can't remember which Minister for Finance. The Ministers of Finance have been talking about third banking forces for a long time, and then I look around and I see third banks and fourth banks and fifth banks. So I think
Let's just take
in times gone by, I would have been quite dogmatic about let's not get the state involved in creating new banks. This is not a good idea. Now I'm not sure that such a position is defensible on doctrinaire grounds. I'm in a receptive mode to good ideas, but I'd have to see the good idea fleshed out. And we have conversations all the time. I also have a desire for more banks to come in, and I've said it before, I wish that more foreign-owned banks would come in.
Do yourself or Mr. Roux have any thoughts on the recent case with Setanta Insurance and the regulation of a company that was engaged in insurance sales in this country by Malta, even though it doesn't seem to have much a presence in Malta?
No. Do you want me to start with this?
Sure.
Yeah. This is not a model that's unique to Malta. So yeah, we are in an unfortunate and uncomfortable position where a significant market company that acquired over a very short period of time significant market share in motor insurance operated without our knowing very much about it because we didn't have any access to information. Now, we weren't unaware, and we became somewhat concerned and communicated quite clearly our concerns to the regulator of that firm towards in October, November, I think November of last year, and they were responsive, and unfortunately it looks as if we may have stopped a worse loss emerging, but it looks as if there's an insolvent situation. As a model, this passporting model is a model that has been used very extensively to the benefit of many employees and tax revenue of Ireland. So we should be careful about criticising it as a model. It does present challenges to the regulator if the regulator is physically isolated from where the business is being done. But it's a fundamental part of the European Union financial services regime, and it's one where, right, this thing has gone wrong with cost to Ireland, but this model has also benefited enormously people in Ireland as well.
Are you aware of any other companies operating in a similar situation where they're just doing their business in Ireland that are regulated in another country?
Well, I know that there are, correct me if I'm wrong, Cyril, 170-something insurance entities which have actually stated their intention or possibility to do passporting into Ireland. But, of course, none of them on that scale. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, that's the right number for the companies licensed to operate through Freedom Services in Ireland. Of course, a number of companies ask for that passporting but do not use it. And those would use it, we don't have the information of how much business they do outside, right? This is not for us to know whether a company set up, say, in Spain, passported services in Denmark, right? So that kind of information we do not have. There are a number of companies set up in Ireland that do most of, if not all of their business outside of Ireland as well. So I think that should be borne in mind.
Governor, can I ask you about just lending in the economy? You will have seen the Bank of Ireland's figures due today, the contraction in the balance sheet again. Now, obviously, there is deleveraging, but the opportunities for profitable new lending, they say, are slim on the ground. I mean, is that a worry for the economy that even the strong banks can't find good lending opportunities?
Well, I think it reflects the situation in the economy, certainly the weak demand. And we've been talking about supply versus demand for a long time, and I think it is a bit of both. I am not at all disappointed that their lending has, the stock of lending has diminished, because that is, as you say, deleveraging, repayment of outstanding loans. It is important and necessary that the banks shrink, and they have shrunk dramatically over the last number of years, both through sales and through repayments. SME lending, is it enough? All over Europe, people are worried about bank lending to SMEs, that banks are too conservative and are husbanding their capital too much, and people are wondering whether reliance on non-banks for financing could be a source. I think that might be a long haul for the SME market. I'm not sure that I have much new to say on that front. I think it's not something that has deteriorated. I think the situation is somewhat healthier than it was. And I think that a period of extreme caution is what one has seen in after nearly all banking crises. And yeah, I mean, we can go through, and yesterday our statisticians here at the Central Bank had a conference where they provide a lot of detailed information about the pattern of new lending and the different sectoral pattern of new lending to SMEs relative to the pattern of the past, and the sectors that are getting loans now that weren't getting loans. And so there's a lot of digging to be done to understand what is it that is working with the banks and what is it that's not, and why.
We just saw something on your statement about fiscal consolidation, and obviously we're going to have a budget in October, and the suggestion seems to be that the government would like to reward people for the last few years, either through the tax system. Would you be in favour of easing up on the plan at the 2.1 billion, or would you like the government to reward people? Absolutely crucial
to continue along the fiscal consolidation path. I mean, it's sort of obvious. You see how the interest rates on government debt have come in, and that is largely due to the disciplined approach to fiscal consolidation and a few other things that have been done as well. But that is the main thing, and I think the government, of course, would like to be able to make adjustments that would be beneficial in the short run. They won't want to do anything that is costly for the long run or costly for the cost of borrowing and could in any way cause a deviation from the path that they have set out so clearly and have reconfirmed in their, whatever it's called, the medium-term fiscal report that they send to Brussels. That is their policy. Within the overall, they can make adjustments and increase one thing and reduce another. That is entirely a matter for them. But they know, and I don't really need to repeat to them that staying on track is even more important than when the Troika are here. When the Troika are here, the financial markets say, "Oh, okay, Ireland, they're doing what the programme says." But then the Troika, they say, "What is Ireland doing now? Are they doing what the Troika would have done?" And the answer is yes, they're staying on track, and which has worked for us.
Governor, the sale of government bonds last year, the 350 million bonds that were sold, have additional bonds been sold this year?
So I'm going to report on an annual basis on that. So the 350 is the only number you're going to get, and come back here next year and we'll tell you what the number for all I can tell you is we will have sold more bonds by the end of this year. Because we have committed to a minimum schedule, of course.
And the minimum schedule, does that still stand, or could that be accelerated at some stage?
Could the minimum schedule be reduced? No. No, the policy is in place. There's a minimum schedule, and we sell in accordance with what we have sold, what we have stated as our strategy.
In terms of mortgage arrears and household debt and household distress, you said in your opening statement that you're happy that the targets are being met. Do you have an estimate on?
I don't know why you guys paraphrase all the time. I had a wording which I'm going to dig out again. What was the wording I had for it? It's there. Broadly on track. Broadly on track.
Right.
Yeah, thank you.
Are the targets not being met?
I am satisfied that the process is broadly on track.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have an estimate at this stage in terms of the number of repossessions? Because I guess it looks
Yeah.
like it's going to be between 5 and 10,000. And are there specific? I suppose the mortgage to rent scheme looks like it's not working. For instance, are there specific interventions that you think should be made?
So I'm not proposing any new action from the central bank. I would have if the process hadn't been broadly on track. But what we're seeing is that cases are being processed and our audits are finding that, some things are not quite right, go back and redo it, do it properly, but broadly on track. Now, how many repossessions will you end up with? This is very hard to tell now because even the numbers you've heard, some from the banks and so forth, of cases that have gone through a legal process towards loss of ownership, that's only a stepping stone. Even the cases that are called concluded, actually probably be better to call them confirmed, it's only another stepping stone towards loss of ownership. Borrowers who haven't engaged with the banks and who are finding themselves in this situation, I think will realise, many of them, most of them, hopefully all of them, will realise that they need to start talking, and that starting to talk can trigger a better solution for them, a restructuring solution rather than a loss of ownership. Now, in some cases, loss of ownership is what they need to have. They're in houses that are too big for them and that are going to be a really burden around their necks forever, and they want to surrender and get into something smaller. That it's not ruled out. But repossession, actually, as opposed to voluntary surrender, most cases this is not the best solution either for the bank or the borrower. So loss of ownership could be in some cases. I don't have a number. I'm not going to forecast a number.
Back with these stress tests. And
Yeah.
it's fair to say that you believe that the way the shock scenarios apply to Ireland, or you're broadly satisfied with the way the shock scenarios will apply to Ireland.
Yeah.
It's great. So
Governor, can I just ask you for an update maybe on the filling of some of the senior roles in central bankers? I think you're our new chief economist, aren't you? And
Yeah.
One is leaving, obviously, and there were a couple of vacancies there. What's the latest in terms of your recruitment for those roles?
Yeah. So we have a new director. We split Fiona's role back into, there are two roles before. Fiona did both of them. We split it back into credit institutions and insurance. Director of Credit Insurance Institutions has been appointed, Sharon Donnery. The Director of Insurance has not yet been appointed. We're still in the process of search. Chief Economist role, I think, yeah, this is still also in process, and yeah, so it's kind of, when these things are in process, I don't want to give you a running commentary on, well, we talked to this guy, and then he said he would, and then he said, no, so I'll just leave it at that. So actually, these are in process, and we'll get them.
Are you finding any difficulty in getting suitable candidates, shall we say, as a result of the public sector pay cuts that Hamilton Road?
We're very fussy. The first thing is we're very fussy. So now I'm sure there are many people out there who could do the job who just don't get past the first point when they ask the headhunter, yes, so how much are they going to pay? And so we don't even see those people, that they don't go beyond it. So I'm sure you could say if we were prepared to pay, the sky's the limit, then it would be easier. I don't deny that it's difficult to retain people of this ability, to attract them and to retain them. It is an interesting job working in regulation, but for the people who have the skills, it's very often a stepping stone. It's something that they say, I'd really love to do that for a few years. So it's quite burdensome, and this is a regulatory experience all over the world. It's quite burdensome, the business of continually hiring at senior levels and see people leave again, and then you have to rehire. Also at the more junior levels, you hire people with great ability and potential, but with not much experience, stay for a short period of time, build their experience and the know-how, and just when you say this person is absolutely invaluable, they're gone. So yes, of course, if you paid much more, you might keep them for a little bit longer. So no doubt the reward structure is relevant, and that's something that we are looking at. We have a very traditional civil service type of reward structure and organizational structure indeed, and that's something that we're looking at very closely now, and we have a rather large effort to review and, where necessary, revise our organizational structure to include, but not just about our reward structure. I don't know whether, Jerry, you want to add anything on that?
There are constraints there. We have to work within the constraints. We have to look to the future as well in terms of the type of organisation that we need to be in order to carry out our mandate effectively. And as the Governor has said, one of the things we're looking at there is the nature of the structure of the organisation in the future in terms of the different layers, the different career paths that exist within the organisation, the generalist roles, specialist roles, and that's all part of what we are going to be taking on in a review over the next number of months.
And specifically on pay or remuneration, are you looking specifically at that and how you might?
Well, reward structure includes that area. Now, you have to remember that we, unlike some other organisations, we've been subject to all of the FEMPI reductions here, and so that has represented quite a considerable squeeze, I should say.
What's your view of the housing market, particularly Dublin?
Oh, bye. We're always very careful not to make forecasts on house prices, partly because we're not much good at forecasting them. There are lots of. Somebody asked me there at a conference I was at last week. They said, "Do you have any models for forecasting house prices?" Oh yes, we do have models for forecasting house prices, but we don't consider them to be very reliable or accurate. I suppose. What some of these models are saying, contradict me now if I'm wrong, Stefan, but what models were tending to say at the trough in Dublin, they were tending to say maybe undervalued. Now, I was a bit sceptical myself that how could you be sure about that, but some of the models were saying that, and now they're not saying that. So,
are you suggesting then that they would be?
You'll have to take your own you have to take your own inference from that. The models are not suggesting that that house prices are undervalued. I've really gone very far there. I think I've gone far too far.
You go further.
We really don't know about house prices, but it's one thing. One thing that's clear is that the credit market is not what is driving the upward movement in house prices since the beginning of 2013.
Governor, where are you at in relation to the move down to the docklands? Have you?
Have we got the planning permission?
Yes.
We got the planning permission. So we had so people are saying, why don't you have a crane down there? So we could wheel down a crane there, but we actually want to get this thing right, and it's a bit more complicated. Lots of things delay process, but we're actually doing a lot to get this actually spot on and right. You might think, well, sure, it's half built, but actually it's just a shell. The whole design had to be redone. It's not, the energy efficiency was very low in what was planned. It's going to be very high in what we have. So that means the facade all had to be changed. The interior usage of the space is completely different for us than for the earlier occupier of that. And then we had quite a long discussion with the city planners before we submitted our planning permission to make sure that we were respecting the sort of principles that they had. And I think that worked in our favour as well. So we will be going to, Jerry might have the details, but we will be going to tender for the main contractor not too long.
Kicked off the initial process for the tendering process for main contractor to get expressions of interest in relation to that. We would anticipate appointing the main contractor towards the end of the year. We have a facade contractor process underway as well, and some of that work will be starting off-site before the end of the year as well. So progress is going ahead.
We thought of putting a banner, like the banner that they had. In fact, they have a political banner now on we thought of putting a banner, future home of the central bank, and then we thought, no.
Have you decided what you're going to do with this building?
No. There'll be no difficulty. There'll be no difficulty finding good occupier of this building.
Are you going to sell it?
I think so, yeah, probably, yeah.
And sorry, can you give us any indication of the cost of the building then?
Don't think we want to do that.
No.
But it's a multiple of what we paid NAMA for the shell. The big costs are in the fit out and the completion of them. Yeah.
Governor, do you think that Allied Irish banks will be in a position to be refloated soon?
Yeah, I mean, this is where everybody is heading. I mean, the state has no, as far as I can tell, the state has no interest in being a long-term holder of Allied Irish Bank. So the big thing is, and they're working towards it, is establish profitability, get the whole arrears situation, both in SME and mortgages, visibly under control, so that equity interest can be based on a greater degree of confidence. So I don't put a timeline on it, but everybody is aligned on that. That is an objective.
Shall we ask a few questions, or is anyone? Joe, yes?
Yeah.
One for Cyril. The balance sheet assessment was carried out last year, and the feedback to the banks. Are you satisfied that the banks incorporated or reflected on it properly when they came out with the full year figures?
For the corporation, certainly, because you can't do this exercise without full cooperation with banks, really. The outcome of that is actually multifaceted. It is the loan classification. You have the use of the new guidelines for what constitutes a non-performing loan. So we issued our guidelines. EBA constituted their own guidelines as well. There's a risk-weighted assets. So all of that had to be incorporated. We have a good way of making sure that it's fully what it should be through the AQR, because actually the balance sheet assessment was done on the basis of the June 2013 accounts, and the AQR is done on the basis of the 2013 year-end accounts. So we're exactly there, you know, making sure and that all of that has been quite reflected. It's really a very similar exercise 6 months later.
And we're using a lot of the...
Are we using? Yes, because of course, you know, a number of I mean, things do not change dramatically, especially you look at individual files for commercial loans. These are large files. You just, you know, you reopen them. So we are updating. There's a large chunk that we are actually simply updating rather than redoing from scratch. So for us, it's partly an update and making sure under now the quality assurance of the ECB and the peer review teams, the international country teams.
So you're happy enough with the provisioning levels in the banks at their end 2013 accounts?
Well, I think you know we had this debate with the various banks, and you know we'll be in a position to answer that in October. You know, and so we'll see whether there is any discrepancy. You know, you can't translate instantly, right? The BSA was on the June 2013 accounts, and we're talking about 6 months later. You mentioned, or was mentioned earlier, that in the meantime things have happened. You know, in you know, real estate prices moved. So there's a space for discussion, right? There's a space for a judgment call. So the outcome of that will be